One Piece live action season 2 is finally out, and man, oh man, it was a fun time. As someone who had, honestly, a lot of issues with the first season, I can safely say that they knocked season 2 right out of the park. And that's for a couple of different reasons. This is just going to be a full spoilers review for the show, as well as some spoilers from late in the manga, since in this season they decided to drop a whole bunch of stuff that would take hundreds of chapters to mention in the actual manga. I wasn't expecting to like season 2 this much, but I was actually really impressed. I've never done a quick review like this for a TV show before, so we'll see how this goes. So first off, I feel like I gotta start off by mentioning probably my favorite part of this show, and that's the music. The music is so gosh darn good in this season. You can really tell that in this season of One Piece live action that every single department was able to let loose a lot more than season 1. And you can definitely tell in the music. Like, in season 1, it was all pretty good. The only thing I found super memorable, I think, was the actual main theme, which is really good. But season 2 just goes so hard. I'm telling you, Whiskey Peak Saloon, that's gonna get me through this year. Whiskey Peak Saloon and Pray to the Sun, those are two immediate bangers. They go immediately into the workout playlist, I tell you what. And then ending the season by teasing New World Symphony with Mr. Zero's theme, whew! That was such a nice touch. And something cool about this is that they released a lot of these tracks before the season came out as like the promotion. So I had already listened to Whiskey Peak Saloon and Pray to the Sun a bunch of times because, you know, they're bops. So when I was actually watching the show, I could definitely tell that the leitmotifs from those songs were apparent throughout each of their respective arcs. It was really cool in the Little Garden arc, like hearing the leitmotif of Pray to the Sun, and I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling nostalgic for a song that I learned last week. I know it's a weird thing to start on, but they handle the music in this season very well, and you can tell that the way that they handle the music in this season is how they handled a lot of the other aspects of the show in this season, to where it's just like, hey, we're done with East Blue, we got people through the door, now it's time to go crazy. Which is sort of how Oda did One Piece in the first place, where East Blue was the tutorial, and then like as soon as we get into the Grand Line, it's just like, yeah, we're doing crazy stuff. Another reason that I think this arc is pretty much better than the first in most every way is obviously because of the source material it is taking from. There are certain things in East Blue from season 1 that, in my opinion, you have to absolutely nail when adapting it. All of the backstories you have to nail. Zoro versus Mihawk, Nami's cry for help in Arlong Park. A lot of these scenes and moments are incredibly important to the characterizations of the Straw Hats. So these are some things that I had high expectations for. There's a lot of stuff in the East Blue Saga that is very important to me, so I was like, you have to nail this. And admittedly, season 1, it didn't always live up to my expectations. So for season 2, personally, the only things that I needed this adaptation to nail were, 1, Luffy's execution in Loketown, him smiling, and the Chopper Hero Look backstory. Those are the main 2 things that I had super high expectations for, and I think that those were both done pretty good. Pretty good. For the rest of season 2, however, there weren't as many things that they had to just like absolutely nail, do a shot for shot, you know, so that means they could go kind of crazy. Now, this part of the story is obviously still super important and has some of my favorite things from the manga. But season 2 has a lot more flexibility to go crazy and really enhance these arcs. Whiskey Peak and Little Garden were so much fun in season 2 because they weren't afraid to be bold and change some stuff around, while still keeping the core themes of these arcs intact. Like, I love Whiskey Peak and Little Garden in the manga, but even there, they aren't perfect arcs. I wouldn't say that Whiskey Peak or Little Garden are better than some of like the highest peaks of East Blue, so One Piece live action was able to actually enhance them in cool ways. Whether it was adding in characters that were definitely not originally in these arcs, or straight up killing characters who never died in the manga. I think that pretty much any time they did that this season, it worked out pretty well. Okay, this is gonna sound really weird, but another big reason why this season I think worked better for me is because of how they treat and characterize the villagers in this arc. It's not something immediately apparent to most people, but I think it's low-key super important. This is where I go on a weird tangent, so buckle up. For the majority of arcs in One Piece, who is Luffy actually fighting for? Who is actually benefiting the most from Luffy beating up the bad guy in each arc? Even if it's not Luffy himself's motivation, the answer to that is usually the denizens living on each respective island. Usually, especially early in One Piece, Oda represents the town through a non-combative main villager character each arc, and usually that character will actually impact the story to show the audience like, hey, here's the problem that Luffy needs to solve. On top of that, he also will throw in another villager, sometimes unnamed, usually like a little kid, to double down on this, showing like, okay, these are the people being affected. The little kid in Alabasta, the little kid who Nami stopped from going to Arlong Park. These might look like the most background of background characters, but they are absolutely integral to conveying the island's plight and why it's so important for the Straw Hats to punch the bad guys real good. You might not think that you care about the helpless citizens in One Piece, but your brain does. And in season 1 of the live action, you can really tell that that was the first thing that they put on the chopping block. The plight of the Marines in Shellstown, I think, was completely looked over. Mayor Boodle and Chow Cho were straight up gutted into just cameos in Orangetown. For Syrup Village, if I remember, they made it to where only the people in the mansion would even be affected, and they took all the rest of the villagers there out of danger completely. They didn't even have time to really characterize any of the chefs in Baratier besides Zeph, and in my opinion, they completely mischaracterized Gonzo and the villagers in Arlong Park, which I think is probably the worst thing that season 1 did. This is just my opinion, though. The fact that in Arlong Park, they changed it to where the villagers actually thought that Nami was a traitor the whole time, I thought that really sucked, since it meant that at the end of that arc, they were fighting for themselves and not Nami. And that whole like, oh, Nami, we didn't know thing at the very end, I don't like that. And that decision is what led them to cut two of my absolute favorite scenes from the entire series. Bro, the scene where Gonzo takes the blade out of Nami's hand and then hugs her and is like, we can help you, Nami. That's so good. And then during the Arlong Park fight, when Nami's like, hey, would y'all mind dying for me? And everyone's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. That stuff was peak. And that wasn't the live action. And it made me not happy. And I obviously know why they did all this. It's because of money and time. They gotta put all of East Blue into 8 episodes, so there's gotta be a lot of things that they have to cut, so they can focus on the more important things, which is spending time with the Straw Hats. And with that, I completely understand. I love One Piece so much because of the Straw Hats, so spending more time with them and characterizing them more, I'm always gonna be a fan of. It's something that we lack a lot of in current One Piece in the New World, so getting more of that in One Piece live action, I am a fan of, I promise. And yeah, on the list of things that you have to keep in these arcs when adapting this, yeah, Commander Ripper and Mayor Boodle, they aren't gonna be high on the list. So yeah, I get it, but still wasn't the super happiest with how they did Arlong Park in certain aspects. With all of that said, however, in season 2, they were able to completely sidestep this problem, in my opinion. And in the one arc that it mattered for, they actually did more of what I wanted. They didn't really have to worry about this villager problem because this section of One Piece is arguably where villagers are the least important in the entire series. The citizens of Loguetown were never important or in danger, so they were able to adapt that arc fairly accurately. And unless you're into like all the filler, every side character that was in this arc, I think, was portrayed excellently. There's really only one character in Reverse Mountain, and I think they did a great job adapting Crocus, and they actually turned him into an even more sympathetic and complex character, which is like, oh, that's cool and surprising. In Whiskey Peak, the citizens were the danger. So, the only cutting of villagers came from Zoro. Little Garden doesn't have any villagers, so that arc also gets to completely avoid that problem. And even though they made a whole lot of changes to what was happening with Dory and Broggy, nothing felt missing. Honestly, they added more stuff from the future than they did take things away. The only arc in this season where the citizens of the island actually matter is Drum Kingdom. And for this arc, I feel like a lot of my complaints from last season were actually absent. They adapted Dalton pretty much perfectly. They actually show more of the villagers in the kingdom, and you can see firsthand how Wapol affected their lives. You see them actually doing stuff in their disheveled village. Even someone as unimportant as the villager who shot Vivi, she feels more like a character than any of the villagers in season 1. And at the end of the arc, a lot of the villagers were actually a part of the big fight. They were actually proactive in the story. I know this sounds very nitpicky and dumb, and I'm probably the only person saying this, but I think that these little things matter to the story a whole lot more than people think. So yeah, Drum Kingdom, very good. Good job, Season 2. I do have some criticisms of Season 2, though these, I will admit, are a lot more nitpicky. I don't like that Luffy actually listens to backstories. I didn't like it last season, and I don't like it now. I think that it's super important that Luffy doesn't care about that crap and will want to help people for simpler reasons, regardless if he knows people's tragic backstories. It is really hard to adapt someone like Luffy into live action. He's too weird and stupid to actually exist in the real world, so you kind of have to characterize him a little differently. And the actor for him, he does a great job, but it's just hard to... Luffy's just so weird. You can't just make a real life Luffy and him just exist and be around other people. So I get it, but I don't like the fact that he's like listening in on Chopper's backstory, and that's why he does certain things. The same thing I had that was such a big thing in Arlong Park last time. It's just like, no, he's not supposed to know. He's supposed to care about Nami because of other reasons, not because he knows about her tragic backstory. It's because he's just her friend because of other reasons. Another thing that I'm not sure how I feel about is how they're adding a lot of future stuff into these early arcs. As a One Piece fan, I think it's super cool seeing all these hints and Easter eggs and bounty posters in the background and mentions of things that won't happen for a while or characters that we won't know about for a while. But also, I know that there's no way that this adaptation is going to be going much farther into this long story. We're already getting to a point where certain arcs are going to be completely unadaptable. So getting later stuff like Binks's Brew and God Valley now, I guess it's nice. But if you're looking at this entire show as an advertisement to get people to read the manga, I'm afraid that it's going to be really confusing when certain things don't come up for hundreds of chapters. And that might mess with new readers' expectations. I'm still on the fence about all this, but personally, I would not recommend that anyone watch One Piece live action as a replacement to the original, or watch this first. But with all of that said, I still think that One Piece live action season 2 was a lot of fun. Whiskey Peak Saloon, I can't stop thinking about Whiskey Peak Saloon, man. Whiskey Peak was indeed peak. When it comes to season 2s of shows that I like with IPs that I like, I don't know if I like it more than Fallout season 2, but as of at least right now, it's definitely on my list of my favorite things from this year. If you want to hear me talk about some of my favorite things from last year, I just made a video about that. Or if you want to hear me yap more about One Piece, I also do weekly chapter reactions. It might have kind of you if you gave either of those things a gander. If you're still here, thanks for watching this to the end. I'll see you around, I do declare. Man, Buggy's so cool.